Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this Monday night in-depth ag forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. Well, with the start of the World Cup, I thought it'd be kind of fun to take a look at the weather and agriculture of where the World Cup's being held this year, which is over in this place called Qatar, this country of Qatar. Now, where you are, this is Saudi Arabia, and I use one of my favorite websites. It's called thetruesizeof.com, where you can overlay different geographical areas with others. So I picked Texas, and I put it right here in the middle of Saudi Arabia, just so you can kind of see the size. But I also put Rhode Island next to Qatar. And that's about, Qatar is just a little bit bigger than Rhode Island. So you can kind of see where this World Cup's being held. But I went looking for ag in Qatar, and it was interesting. I was able to find a couple things. So where we are in the world is right here. And we're coming here in the Persian Gulf, where Qatar kind of sticks out into. And as I keep zooming in here on Google Maps, you can actually see, you can see that there are a few locations where there is some pivot irrigation, like right here. And if we just keep zooming into this area, there you go, we can now see some of those fields. So there's farming going on in Qatar. Now, the World Cup being held there, the United States will play again on Friday. And just taking a look at the Friday weather, higher pressures and control, some light winds that come out of the kind of the south and east going across parts of the Persian Gulf here, but really no precipitation is being forecast, at least over the next 10 days, not only just for the end of this week. So much heavier precip farther to the north here, but certainly not over where the World Cup is. I thought you might find that interesting tonight. Now, over the weekend, of course, the big story was all of the very cold air that was dislodged from the western United States in the Canadian prairie last week that made it over the Great Lakes, and it just became fully established as a big ridge built into Alaska. And that's what set us up to have pretty epic lake effect snow during that time period. I think the max that I saw in New York was 80 inches. And so that's an incredible amount of snow from these shore parallel bands that came off of Erie and Ontario. But the wind parallel bands into parts of the UP Michigan and then lower Michigan here were quite impressive as well. And we had a lot of scattered snow showers around this deeper trough that's been in place. Now, I was looking at some satellite imagery today. I'm going to take you back to this morning. Now, what you're going to notice here, here's the snow in lower Michigan, and you can see it because the clouds are going to move over the top of it. But there were a couple of areas, like right in through here, where a few of those lake effect snow bands made this extent into northern Ohio. But the mild air that's in place today kind of evaporated those. So you can see them there in the morning, and by evening, as the mild air came in, we really saw the lighter snowfall amounts just melt, okay? But it's just amazing to think that underneath this, there are some places here that have over 6 feet of snow right now. And I'm sure you saw a lot of this on the news over the weekend or whatever you choose to get your weather information. Now, as we go forward in this forecast, there's going to be a few maps I'm going to start showing with quite a bit more regularity, and this is one of them. What I do is I use the snowfall data from NOAA, and I produce a map that will accumulate departure. So it's a accumulated snowfall departure in inches. And when you look at this particular map, of course, the lake effect snow from this past weekend just jumps out. And of course, remember before that, back at the beginning of November, like the 6th through the 10th, we had two systems that rolled through the Northwest, and then a third one that dove down and it produced the blizzard that went through parts of North Dakota after hitting Montana. So right now, at this point in the year, much of the Rockies, parts of the Cascades, and the Sierra Nevada are sitting with above normal snowpack. There's a few places that are below, like the northern Cascades here in the northern Rockies and some places down here in Colorado. But that's something we need to talk about, because not only do you see there's a snowfall deficit so far this year, but there's also kind of this long-running problem with getting moisture back into that area. And the reason for that is the spine of the Rockies, for purposes of this video, kind of run right in through here. And what we've seen is we've seen systems that have come in like this, they've come in like that, and we've had systems that have formed down here and rolled up, and we're about to watch one that's going to do just like this. The problem is this whole pattern kind of exacerbates or makes worse the rain shadow effect. The atmosphere has been unable to return moisture back into this particular part of the plains where we grow a lot of hard red winter wheat, which means the drought has certainly deepened in this particular area. Looking at the latest soil moisture data, you can continue to see that. But there is snow on the ground here. It just has yet to melt to get into the soil, which is why we don't see the major improvements in this area. And we are going to see, because of a system coming out late this week, improvements on the lack of moisture that you see in this area. So we'll give you those precip totals here in just a few moments. But I want to keep kind of thinking about what's going on right here in parts of Kansas, especially western Kansas. So I went in to Garden City And I just plucked off the Prism year-to-date precipitation graphics that I make. And I want to point out that they're currently less than 50% of normal precipitation. And the last time they saw some meaningful rain was on July 30th. So that's a very long time period of very, very little precipitation that has come through. And that precipitation, on the 30th of July was about an inch. So this just shows you the depth of that drought. And on top of that, if we go to the year-to-date temperatures, what you're going to see here is that summer, they had 21 days above 100, 86 days above 90, and several very warm nights. So this was a very hot and very dry summer. And of course, we've seen the drought rapidly expand there. Okay, so from here, let's just now go look at where the pattern was, what it did in the last week, and what I think I missed with this pattern, all right? So from the end of October, when the pattern broke from the extreme drought, from the very warm fall conditions, what happened was we took the jet stream screaming off of Japan, built up into a weak ridge at times that was here are the Aleutian Islands, and then dove into a trough that entered the northwest and then exited between the Great Lakes and the Hudson Bay. Now, that particular setup is what drove many of those systems I just kind of highlighted for you. But then we saw last week the pattern broke. And what it did was it broke into one large ridge here that was over Alaska. And it's difficult to see, but there was another large ridge there over Scandinavia. So the jet stream still came moving off of Japan, but was broken into two pieces. So systems kind of, you can see the flow coming around like this and like that. So this would be the 12th through the 19th. And this was the pattern that set up the deep cold and the large trough here that drove that lake effect snow event. Now, just thinking about that, what I missed is that I think I was overly confident that the MJO was going to be in phase 6. And here we are. And you can see that here's the westerlies coming out of the Indian Ocean. Here's the strong easterlies with La Niña. And where do they sit? Right here. That, if you keep following it down, is phase 5. Now, we're going to see a bit of a reset. And we see that the trade winds come back on here. And that's a lot of phase 7. Which means we never really got to the good phase 6, which I thought we would see at this point in the month. So what does all of that mean? Well, if you're in phase 5 MJO, okay, sure, deep trough, fast jet stream winds coming off of Japan, same thing south of the Aleutian Islands, but you get ridging here. And there's that deeper trough that we saw over the weekend that drove the lake effect snow event. So we ended up getting this with a lot of high latitude blocking. If you then say, well, if we're going to go toward phase 7, what does that give us? Well, that gives us a really strong branch of the jet that comes off of Japan, but does it actually make it to the West Coast? You see, we need these to make it to the West Coast in order to deliver system after system after system, which we want. But again, a lot of high latitude blocking, big high pressure cells sitting there. And so what this does is this limits the extent of the jet expanding across the Pacific Ocean. And I'll be honest, I thought it could do it. I just thought it could break through this and get here. So what we end up getting now is this. So this is the 12Z European model run. We're now looking into the future, not the past. And what I want to show you is as I play this out, I just want you to watch the behavior of the jet stream from the Himalayas to Japan, Japan to the Gulf of Alaska. Ready? So as we play this forward, if the MJO goes to phase 7, that will energize, that will provide the momentum to extend the jet off of Japan. But the problem is, as you saw, the MJO phase 7 does not allow the jet stream to just continue to barrel on through. And it ends up wanting to kind of split like this. But we don't have a strong subtropical component developing. So going into the end of this month, we kind of see this failure of the models well, I should just say a failure of the atmosphere as seen in the models to get the flow to break through. So if it's unable to do that, our systems are not going to be born along the West Coast, come flying over the mountains and then eject as these massive storm systems. Instead, we have 2 weeks of flow just off the West Coast. And what that did was this. This is the new 15-day outlook from the European model. Okay, we're going to target more systems into Alaska and British Columbia, but there is no, look at this, that little area right in through there represents just no strong flow. Now we're going to talk about why this is so wet. I'll show you that in just a few seconds. But I want to let you know it's not just the European model. This is the GFS over the same time frame, an almost identical forecast. So that's going to be the setup for what I'm going to explain to you for the next, 2-week outlook. And then we're going to come back to that again to understand where this is going to go through December and beyond. So today, remember the setup we've been discussing. We've been able to get very cold air very far to the south. We still have those strong winds that come through here. And historically, when you get cold air into the Gulf of Mexico, it really sets this region up to develop systems that like to just pop out somewhere and get into the lower Mississippi River Valley or the southeast, and eventually race up the east coast. But there's another component to this. If I take you up to the mid-levels of the atmosphere, what we're all watching right now is right there. That very subtle shortwave trough is the setup for a big system on and after Thanksgiving. So we need to get in there and kind of figure out where it's going to go. But the models have really struggled honing in on where that very small shortwave feature is going to be. So I want to show you what they've been doing to us, all right? So as we play this forward, let me just get you out here to Tuesday. There it is. That's Tuesday night. This is that wave that is currently here. We're looking at it now in vorticity. Now, the latest European model, the 12Z, takes it by Wednesday afternoon into the evening and drops it over, the northern four corner states in Wyoming, and actually has what we call a wave break. So this high has to break over. Whenever there's a wave break, we tend to pinch off a piece of the jet stream. In this case, we're going to cut off a low here. And that low gets cut off over Texas. Now, this is already to Friday morning, and this is sitting here. And if you've been watching any of my past content, I have been saying that there'll already be a system that's moving all the way up here on Friday. The latest model runs completely take that out. Now, look at this. I'm going to compare this to this morning's data. So this is Friday, the 25th. Big low over Texas. Do you want to know where it was in this morning's models? This will tell you how much the models are struggling. This is where it was in this morning's run. See how much farther to the east it was? This just happens when there's such subtle features that we're trying to project what's going to happen to them as they come over the mountains and then eject into the plains. You just get large model variability out of this. So we go back to the 12Z run, and I want to show you the good news is not only does the European put it there, but the GFS puts it there as well. So there's better model agreement with what's going to happen as we go forward. So now that you see the struggles we've been having using the models to kind of time this system, let's now go in and look at what happens when that wave breaks. So this is the 12Z European model, and we're going to play this forward. And we have a little clipper coming through the Red River Valley of the North on Tuesday morning. It's going to spread snow over Lake Superior on Tuesday afternoon. And here's the wave we're watching. That's the one coming into the northwest. That's a snowmaker for the Northern Rockies and Northern Cascades. It then dives into the northwest Tuesday night, could spread some heavy snows in northern Washington and hit the Northern Rockies in Idaho. Now, this is the system's position on Wednesday. Now, if you remember, it's doing something like that. It's going to try to cut itself off. So this is Wednesday morning, Wednesday afternoon, and evening. And we get our way into Thursday morning, Thursday afternoon, and evening. Now notice, instead of this system, which is going to be sitting and spinning right here, rapidly taking off toward the east, it's now got a much slower trajectory. Because before, I would have told you it was really going to just move. And now what we see is this is now getting into Friday. The European model went very aggressive on the 12Z run with snow. And that's just 4 days out, calling for the snow here in the panhandles back into, really in the panhandle of Texas, but back into New Mexico. Much heavier rain spread out ahead of this. And that low just sits there and spins. And then slowly by Saturday, getting into Sunday, and then even into early Monday, makes its way into parts of New England. That is about 3 days slower than originally forecast because the wave breaks, cuts off, and sits there and spins. So after that, there's another system I want you to watch. And the models have been, I know we're way out there in model land here, but they've been very consistent with another system on the 30th, really the 29th to the 30th, right in through here. And we do have moisture coming into the northwest. It's just not the fire hose I'd predicted with the MJO into phase 6. It's more subtle. The systems have to sneak in by coming over the top, and that's what you've got here. So we have 3 big systems to watch. The one that comes out Thursday and slowly moves by Sunday night to New England. We have the second system that comes out on Tuesday and emerges here by Wednesday. And then we have the third system that's going to be hitting the Pacific Northwest, and all of that's within the next 8 days. And there's some agreement with all of this. This is the GFS 12Z run. So there's the clipper we talked about. As we then see the system coming in here on Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, you know that the GFS cuts it off here Thursday. And look, it does something very similar. Tries to make some snow, for example, in parts of Texas and New Mexico, And then the system just slowly tries to unload here, comes to the eastern Corn Belt, and then stretches by Sunday night out to New England. Now watch. The next system starts to come in. Oops. And what do we see? A very similar thing with another low here next Tuesday, Wednesday, and another one entering the northwest. So that's a lot of agreement between the models on what we could expect overall. Now we need to put some numbers on this, and I thought we'd do snow first. So if we just take a look and play this out with the European model, this is crazy. Understand that this is an operational run, and with that system that we expect to happen. Now remember, this is snow coming in Friday night into Saturday morning. Actually, Friday into Saturday morning. The European latest run. We just got to watch this. Don't look at this if you live here and go, we're in for it. This is just a single run. But that second system that comes through, look at how much better it does at spreading snow in the northwest, and then it possibly ejects as a bigger system here. Please understand, we are way out there in the model forecast, so there's a lot of uncertainty with both of these systems, but I like it. I like where it's going. And the GFS doesn't really have that, different of a solution. It's a little farther to the south on the snow here, but it's got a second system. See it coming in there. And that one's driving a lot of snow into the Sierra Nevada too. So what we need to do is we need to kind of take a bit of a tempered look at this. The first map here is the next 10 days probability of getting at least an inch of rain. Now this is an inch of liquid equivalent. So where there's snow, this is all going to be we're melting it down and giving you the liquid equivalent. The good news about slowing this system down is it brings moisture back farther to the west into more of Kansas and Oklahoma, which we know are places that have struggled with drought. It then slows down over the lower Mississippi River Valley, where we know that the Mississippi River is very low, and it delivers more rainfall into the southeast and even into the eastern Corn Belt. Now, just thinking about the Mississippi, I had a user that watches my videos, Alex, who sent me a great new link. Alex, this is fantastic. I didn't know this existed. This is good. But what it's now doing is it's showing you the river levels at Memphis, in this case, on the Mississippi, and the projections on where things are going. I believe that once they get the newest data in here, that these projections for the river are actually going to be turning up a whole lot more than currently denoted, because there's going to be some very heavy rainfall falling over the lower Mississippi basin, helping the river to start to build back up. That's a very good thing to see with this forecast. I like that. But on the snow side of it, this is the probability through the next 10 days of getting 3 inches. So remember, the first system, the one that comes in like this, and then slowly moves that way. This is the one that might deliver the snow in this area. We then have the second system that comes down, and it follows more of a trajectory that takes it through this area. That's why you start to see better chances of snow here. And don't forget, there was a third one that comes down after that. So we got multiple chances. It's just that this pattern is not as vigorous as what I had been anticipating to finish this month. Now, where does it actually end the month? This is December 1st. And you can see a big ridge in the Aleutian Islands, and there is troughing here over the west. And that troughing that you have, let's draw that again right here, is going to be critical to the temperature pattern and any system that could develop in the Intermountain West. So thinking about that, this is the new week 2 forecast. Now, why drier in the kind of Puget Sound area if you're going to have big troughs that drive in here? Well, the problem is these troughs are actually setting up too far east. And the farther east they are, the better the chances are that the snow is south, sets up more in the Great Basin before systems eject. But again, week 2 continues to see above normal precipitation on the lower Mississippi, another sign that we're going to start to fill that river back in a little better. Okay, from there, let's talk temperatures. We've already seen these highs on Monday. We know that we're going very mild in the Midwest and in the Central Plains for Tuesday and Wednesday. Now remember, on Thursdays, when the system starts to come down here, and then as we go forward into Friday, that system is slowly starting to lift its way out. I do not think that the models have got the temperatures right here. Just so you know, Thursday into Friday, I think we've got the temperatures wrong, given the latest data. But very mild to the north of that. And as we kind of play this forward, going out here, very mild as a ridge opens up in the west. Okay, so let's have a look at this temperature pattern. This is the next 15 days in a 5-day sliding window. So we do know that we finish November and start the next month with better chances of more mild conditions. But as you saw out there around day 10, the trough develops back in the west. So there's southeast ridging, warmer conditions. But this doesn't last. And what we're going to see here is with that split flow and with the big Arctic highs forming, we're going to set things back up again, it looks like, to deliver some colder air through the Canadian prairie. That's been a consistent theme with some of the latest data that we've got. Now, is there any agreement from this point going forward in some of the models? Let's now turn our attention to the long range. This was released on Friday. This is the December 3rd through December 16th forecast from the CPC. And you can see that they are favoring below normal temperatures across the northern tier of the United States and also a more active pattern entering the Pacific Northwest. Again, the problem with this whole setup is that there's no good mechanism. We're not getting the right kind of flow to deliver that moisture back farther into the hardwood and wheat belt back into this area. We're trying, you can at least see models are attempting to make low pressure systems, but not able to deliver that moisture into this area. So let's compare this to the newest data from the ECMWF. First, on the temperature side of things, you notice that going into the month of December, there are significant cold risks. I'm blaming a lot of this on a couple of things. Slightly weaker than normal polar vortex. We talked about that on Friday. We also see a lot of Arctic high pressure. There was all that Siberian and North American snow cover. Remember, we were talking about that on Friday, which is helping to displace more colder air farther to the south. But on the precipitation side of it, again, that's your December outlook on temperatures. On the precipitation side of it, what's very interesting is what you see here in the west. Notice where the wet anomalies are. They're more on the east-facing slopes of the Cascades, the Northern Rockies, and here in the on the Sierras. And to get that, that means that we're not getting strong onshore flow, clearly. But maybe the flow's coming in like this and kind of curling up more of these lows over the Great Basin. That's what I think I'm seeing here with this. And that's better for Montana. That's better for parts of Idaho and the Columbia Basin, for example. But it's not the right pattern to just drive moisture into the Cascades and the Klamath Mountains in the Sierra Nevada. But this does often mean systems curl out. And with it, if there's a lot of cold air to the north, we could see this month being a pretty snowy month for a lot of people across the northern half of the United States. There seems to be some consistency there. The other part of my story is really going to be about what's happening with this La Niña. And this La Niña, what I'm watching for right now is when and where the trades are going to let go. So let me make a point for you. We've seen stronger trade winds here. We've seen the westerly wind burst, and it's given us a lot of phase 5 right now. These westerly winds that have been across the Indian Ocean, they're all a part of the negative phase of the Indian Ocean dipole. They are going to fade. And when they start to fade, this La Niña will also start its fade because it's going to allow these trade winds to really extend at times. And as that occurs, there's going to be a reaction. There's going to be a change in where the momentum's getting transferred out of the tropics. And that will shift everything. That'll start to be, well, that will be the start of the breakdown of this particular La Niña. But I want to also show you this. If we continue to see warmer water here and warmer water there, and Arctic high pressure forming in this area, that likes to dump cold air across Russia and dump cold air across the United States and possibly drop it into Europe later on this winter. And so that particular setup, I think, is also being advertised in where the MJO is going to go. Now, I'm going to do the MJO forecast just differently for you here. One of my favorite websites, I believe this is in Italian, but they've made this beautiful graphic of when you have an El Niño, a La Niña, or neither for each of the different phases of the MJO for each month of the year. Now we're going into December, and we are currently in a La Niña, so that's the middle one. Notice how in December, the most preferred feature historically, which is kind of in the green light here, that particular box, is when you have MJO phase 7. So that is not the full extended jet. That's ridging that runs across the northern tier of the the Arctic. And that's the type that likes to set out that colder air that comes across much of the US and Canadian prairie. Now, what about going beyond that? if we finish December, we're seeing a lot of phase 7. What do we typically see if there's a fading La Nina in January? It's a lot of phase 6, phase 7, and phase 8. Notice that. That's the greens. That's what we're looking for. So MJO phase 6, if this is now January, okay, we could really see some active systems here, but look at this ridging that we tend to see over the poles, and could it extend into the west? That's a very odd look, but that's what could possibly happen. This would drive a lot of systems in like this, and then they would dive across the United States. Let's keep going. What if we saw MJO phase 7? Well, phase 7 of the MJO in January says put a large ridge just off the coast. And that would be the one that would just drive a lot of cold air in January into this big section of North America. It would also produce a big Siberian high over here and possibly drive a lot of cold air into Europe. See, if you get a big ridge here, that's going to drive cold air into Europe. So MJO phase 7, that's one we're going to watch out for in January, especially if the La Nina lets go. What about phase 8? That's also a very common one when there's a La Nina. Well, again, you tend to get this ridging just off the coast, so the flow tends to do this. And phase 7 and phase 8 send Europe into the freezer. It sends Eastern North America into the freezer, and also it sends Siberia in there. So if you time any of that over the next 45 to 60 days with a polar vortex disruption, get the MJO to phase 7, 8, and you have a weak and not extended jet, we are on the lookout here for some substantial cold air intrusions. And I think that's just going to be just a big part of what this pattern is going to be as La Nina lets go. Now, since I'm talking about La Nina, I want to show you one last thing here. I'm going to go to the Columbia University forecast. This was just released over the weekend. This is their new outlook based on mid-November data. Here we go. And this is what they're seeing. Now, remember, this is an ocean temperature index. So there's still a 75% chance we're dealing with La Nina December, January, and February. But remember, the trade winds are the first thing to let go. The atmosphere is the first to get rid of a La Nina. The ocean temperatures are the last to respond. What is interesting is, if we are able by midwinter to get rid of this La Nina, we could likely very quickly transition into El Nino-like behavior. That means subtropical jet. That means wet for much of the United States. And what you've got here is, now look at this. The highest probability of any of these three events, La Nina, neutral, or El Nino, by next summer, July, August, September, is now El Nino. That is a key indicator of some drought risks east, better rains for midsummer in the plains and Midwest, but a risk of higher heat across the western United States. So we got to be on the lookout for that as that goes forward. More on this coming very soon. Lastly, I just want to give you some international stuff to think about. Why don't we go to, Australia first? Their current situation with root zone soil moisture, I don't think there's any surprises here. It's extremely wet, and you can see how how high the values are. Just thinking about it, month-to-date precipitation anomalies, we have got several places that have extended from the northern side of Australia all the way into New South Wales and South Australia, parts of Queensland, but Victoria, and the eastern side of Tasmania here that have been, again, seeing this 25 to up to 200 millimeter surplus in rainfall. Remember, 30 millimeters is an inch. So we're talking about several inches of excess rainfall on top of what October already delivered. NDVI values are through the roof here because everything's so green with all of this rain, but it's not been an easy spring to forecast. Major storm systems, a lot of hail. It's been a very rough go of it. If we look at the longer range, the 10-day forecast, there's going to be another push of moisture coming in as the MJO sits in phase 5, so it comes in just like that. But what my eye's really been drawn to is what's going on in South America. Very dry conditions are being forecast there. And if we take a look over the next 10 days, there's a large area of central and southern Brazil all the way down into a big section of Argentina that's kind of showing up with near nothing in terms of precipitation. And the issue here is that lately, sure, in South America, there was some decent rain that hit about a week ago in southern Brazil, in Argentina. But if you notice, the drought underneath that in the groundwater supply is still very low. The shallow groundwater is still very low. What we're now starting to see is a few places in the north kind of picking up on some drought issues. there's still anticipation that this is going to be a very, very large crop going forward. And I want to show you why. Why don't we come back to Australia to finish this up? Here we go. This is the new December outlook from the European, and it's just recovering moisture here. So this drier time period may not fully last too long into the month of December before better rains come in. And if those materialize, big crop in the north. But the model did actually go drier in Argentina, parts of Paraguay, Uruguay, and southern Brazil, meaning that the drought issues in Argentina continue to be forecast by the models. But an indicator on this whole discussion about La Niña letting go starting to show up in Australia. To see it being forecast to be drier than normal for much of Australia means the MJO had to move. And if the MJO moved, that means that the strong westerlies out of the Indian Ocean and the strong trade winds are moving as well. And that's our first symptom that La Niña is going to start to fade a bit. So the newest update here, the longer range outlook for December in Australia is drier. So that's the story we're going to continue to piece together as we go forward. Now, I won't talk to you again on these long-range updates until next Monday. I'm going to take Thanksgiving off to spend with family, and also I'm going to take that Friday off just to also spend more time with family. So you'll get a new update, long-range update from me on next Monday. Until then, I hope you all have a good rest of your week and a good Thanksgiving. Be safe, and we'll talk again soon. Thanks.